Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let us resound high as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Please be seated, everyone. At this time, please give a warm URI welcome to Provost Don DeHaze.
Wow, those lights are bright. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the URI community, I warmly welcome all of you to this kickoff event to Black History Month. We're very, very pleased at the turnout tonight, and I particularly wish to welcome our featured speaker, Professor Charles Ogletree from Harvard University School of Law. I can't think of a more fitting way to kick off Black History Month at the University of Rhode Island than to have on our campus a passionate and inspiring teacher, a leading scholar in civil rights, and a renowned national and international expert on issues of race, class, crime, and as I learned tonight, cities. Professor Ogletree, it is a pleasure and a privilege to have you on our campus. Thank you so much for being here. As you noted from the video clip a few moments ago, tonight's lecture is also the inaugural lecture in the brand new Marlen Bodden Africana Lecture series. We are indebted to Ms. Bodden, who became a very close friend of the university just a year ago, for her support, not only for tonight's lecture, but for a lecture series that will continue well into the future. Unfortunately, Ms. Bodden could not be here tonight, but we got to hear her words and her thanks and see her joy, and so I want to acknowledge her. I also want to acknowledge Professor Quenu and the Africana Studies faculty for organizing not only tonight's event, but a whole series of events that will take place over the next month or so. And I remind everybody, while tonight we have a featured and extraordinary event, but let's not lose track of what this month is about. This is an opportunity for us to reflect and to appreciate and to celebrate the extraordinary contributions to our heritage created by our African American sisters and brothers. So please don't lose track of that as we celebrate this evening and go to the events over the next few weeks. With that, I would like to turn the podium over to the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dean Winnie Brownell.
Thank you, Provost DeHaze. It's thrilling to see so many of you here tonight. I know if Marlen could be here, she would be as thrilled as I am. And it's particularly exciting because, as Dr. Quenu has shared with us, this is a dream come true. of the Africana Studies faculty. I'm absolutely honored to be able to welcome Dr. Ogletree here, as well as everyone here tonight. We were able to bring back several alumni, as well as our faculty, staff, and students. I would like to thank some people, because an event like this doesn't happen by accident. It takes a village. I would like to first thank the faculty in Africana Studies for having the dream and wanting to begin this wonderful lecture series that will happen every year. Thank you so much for your vision. We are on a quest to enhance the Africana Studies program, to increase its visibility, and to provide exciting opportunities for our wonderful students. And these faculty lead the way. I also want to thank the Black History Month Planning Committee, who did so much to really remind us, as Provost DeHaze has said, what this month is for and what we are remembering and celebrating, and what we are also teaching each other and our students about the past and creating a better future. I also want to express appreciation to Dr. Vanessa Quenu, who leads the way, who is the director of the program in Africana Studies. Thank you, Dr. Quenu. And Assistant Dean Earl Smith in the College of Arts and Sciences, who has welcomed so many fabulous students who never visited our Dean's office before. Thank you, Dean Smith, for your contributions to Africana Studies and to the College of Arts and Sciences. And Associate Dean Rebecca Schiff, who has done so much to lead the way in raising funds to help enhance Africana Studies. I remember she couldn't even get the sentence out of her mouth when she said, "Would you like me to contact Dr. Professor Ogle?" And she couldn't get tree out before I jumped up and said yes. We stole her away from Harvard Law School, so I'm really thrilled that she helped make the connection. And I also want to express appreciation to Vice Provost John McCrae, who does so much for Africana Studies and for the College of Continuing Ed. And our teams at the Multicultural Center and Talent Development, and the department heads of the College of Arts and Sciences who got the word out. And obviously, thank you for letting our community know that tonight is going to be very special. Dr. Ogletree, we hope your remarks tonight and your visit here to URI just marks the beginning of an enduring relationship between the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice and the University of Rhode Island. Just the beginning of a wonderful and enduring relationship. And now it is my honor to introduce my dear colleague, Dr. Vanessa Quenu, Director of Africana Studies and Professor of Communication Studies in the Harrington School of Communication and Media.
Thank you. Glory to God. He's empowered us to be here tonight when so many people say that it cannot be done. The people from all walks of life, black, white, Asian, African, Native American, and so many other ethnicities can come together and get it done. You ought to give yourselves a hand. To our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Charles Ogletree, welcome. Welcome to the University of Rhode Island. We hope after your time here that you will agree with us that it is a special place, and we hope that you have felt the hospitality that has been sincere here tonight. I join my voice with others that we are most glad and excited that you're here with us. To President Dooley, who was not able to be here tonight, to Provost DeHaze, thank you for your support, and Dean Winifred Brownell and her staff of associate and assistant deans, including Dr. Trish Morikoff and Assistant Dean Earl Smith, and to Dean Dr. Rebecca Schiff, whose contributions to this evening have been invaluable. Thank you. We appreciate you. Among the students, several classes are here. I think Dr. Norman Barber's class is in the house. Is that right? Yeah. Dr. Go-Ming Chen's class is in the house, the graduate course, COM 502. I know COM 333 better be in the house. There are so many of you, and we are so excited. Women and Gender Studies Department is represented. The History Department is represented. We have some special guests, too. The Sankofa mentoring students from North Kingstown High School. I hear that you're in the house. Just wave your hand. All right. And we're so excited that the URI in Ghana students who went to Ghana during the winter session, the study abroad, that you are in the house and you are special guests tonight. Those of you who went to Ghana, would you please stand? All right. And that's just a small representation. We were so thrilled to take 21 students to Ghana, West Africa, and come home. That's the part. That's the good part. Pink Women is in the house, right? Yeah, I see you. And Uhura Sasa is in the house. All right, I think I've taken enough time. You get the idea. We're glad that you're all in the house, but we just want you to feel welcome. And we want you to know that tonight is all about you, that Black History Month is for everybody. It is a university-wide celebration, and we invite you to take part. We're so happy and so excited that the person who is going to introduce our keynote speaker is here, and it is my privilege to welcome him to the podium. He is the Vice Provost for Urban Programs at the Alan Sean Feinstein College of Continuing Education. Let's welcome Dr. John McCrae.
Thank you. Can you hear me out there? Yes, thank you. It's often said that sometimes there are a lot of people here who don't work for money, but they do work for praise. So every time you praise me, I feel good. Because you're not paying me. You know what I mean? Yeah, right. It is a pleasure and an honor, actually, to be here before you. Some of you I've seen in the great city of Providence, the place, as we say, the city, and we welcome you there. I would like also to recognize my immediate supervisor. That's the provost of the university, Dr. Don DeHaze, as many have already, and my colleague, Dean Brownell, who, without her assistance, many of these programs could not have taken place, nor, taken my word for it, would they exist at the University of Rhode Island if she had not been permanently behind them. And, of course, to my colleague, Granesta, and, of course, the new Dr. Reverend. Where is he? That's right. Dr. Reverend Queen, please stand up. He just received his doctorate, a month ago. He finished his work. Those of us, there he is. Those of us who are familiar with the process know that it is a long journey, and you must maintain a great deal of discipline and consistency in what you're doing. And also to my colleagues in the Africana Studies programs who have been very great in assisting us here. Today I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker, whose principal topic will be on post-racial America, the age of Obama. All right. Go on. It's Dr. Charles Ogletree, the Harvard Law School Jesse Clemenco Professor of Law and founding and Executive Director of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice. He is a prominent legal theorist who has earned an international reputation by taking a hard look at complex issues of law and by working to secure the rights guaranteed by the Constitution for everyone equally under the law. He has examined these issues not only in the classroom, on the internet, and in the pages of prestigious law journals, but also in the everyday world of the public defender, in the courtroom, and in public television forums where these issues can be dramatically revealed. He furthers dialogue by insisting that the justice system protect rights guaranteed to these citizens by law. He is the founding and executive director of Harvard Law School, new Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice, named in the honor of the visionary lawyer who spearheaded the litigation of Brown versus the Board of Education that focused on a variety of issues relating to race and justice. And just as a added note, since I know him already also, Charles Hamilton was the co-author of Black Power with Touré. Mr. Ogletree has served as faculty director, associate dean, and vice dean of the Harvard Law School Clinical Program. He holds honorary doctorates of law from North Carolina Central University, New England College of Law, Tougaloo College, Amherst College, Wilberforce University, and the University of Miami School of Law. He's earned a Master's of Art and Bachelor of Arts with distinction in political science from Stanford University, where he was a Phi Beta Kappa. He also holds a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School, where he served as Special Projects Editor of the Harvard Civil Rights, Civil Liberty Law Review. In 2006 and again in 2007, Mr. Ogletree was named by Ebony Magazine as one of the 100 most influential Black Americans. He was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame for the National Black Law Students Association, where he served as national president from 1977 to 1978. Professor Ogletree also received the first ever Rosa Parks Civil Rights Award given by the city of Boston. And he is the recipient of numerous community and national awards for his outstanding leadership as a legal scholar and advocate for civil rights. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage and to the University of Rhode Island, Dr. Charles Ogletree.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am deeply humbled by this invitation to speak at this great university. I want to first give my thanks to Marlen Bodden, who finances this lecture series, President Dooley, who could not be here, but for his wonderful remarks, the Provost Don DeHaze, Dr. Brownell, who's the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Vanessa Quinu, who's the Director of Africana Studies, and John McRae for introducing me. And a special thanks to Rebecca Schiff. I've known Rebecca for half a decade. Had the great pleasure when she worked in the development office at Harvard. And we went on many trips, and I never seen anybody so bold in asking for money. She made my job easy in terms of what she was able to do. And I also want to give a special thanks to all the people who are here and the diversity of the audience that's here. It's very impressive to see both students and faculty and alumni here, and it just reinforces my sense of what a great university this is and the great importance that it has to the state of Rhode Island. I am a professor at the Harvard Law School, but I didn't start there, and I think it's important to make that clear. I am the very proud son of two African Americans. My mother's from Little Rock, Arkansas, and my father's from Birmingham, Alabama. They moved to the West Coast and met each other in 1950. My father had what was called an old-fashioned shotgun wedding. I know what you think. Normally that means the woman's pregnant and you have to marry her. Well, my mother wasn't pregnant in 1950, but he was seeing her and he was much older. So my grandfather pulled a shotgun on him and said, "You better marry this girl before you sleep with her." And out of that wonderful union, I was born in 1952. It's amazing as well thinking about that. Neither of them finished high school, but they had this sense of education for all their children, and they thought it was very important. I was the oldest. I know that young people here at the University of Rhode Island didn't experience this, but when I was admitted to Stanford University, I first was reluctant to go. I thought Stanford was in Connecticut. And I told my counselor, I'm not going to go all the way back to Connecticut. It's too cold. She said, "Charles, Stanford is in California. You're from California. It's 2 hours away. Go to Stanford." And so I packed up and left that August in 1971, heading to Palo Alto. And something fate would have it, about 2 blocks from my house in Merced, the central part of California, 2 blocks away, my 1960 Ford Model T had a flat tire. I came back to my house within half an hour and tried to explain that I had a flat tire. I went into the bedroom. My brothers, all three of them, had already moved my bed out. Their point was, he's gone. We're going to take that space, right? But there was another message in that I never realized. That their point was, you're leaving because we know you're going to be somebody. You're going to do something. And they had not gone to college. They had not thought about it. But the whole idea was that juniors going to college, that must mean something. And it was, in a sense, a refreshing sense that they had my back and my confidence even then. And as a freshman at Stanford, my first year, I met my wonderful wife, Pam, who was born in Baltimore. How about those Baltimore Ravens? And she moved from the suburb of Baltimore to the suburb of Compton, California, where she grew up. And we met as freshmen at Stanford, and we've been married, come this August, will be 38 years. A wonderful celebration from my point of view. Before I launch into the remarks, and the title is the Post-Racial America in the Age of Obama, and I'm going to give you some views about both perspectives in terms of it's the best of times, in many respects the worst of times. But I wanted to at least make sure that the audience understands that it was a little more than a decade ago in December 2002 when I turned 50. And some people who are that age understand I didn't apply, didn't ask for it. I received in the mail my AARP card. And I have no idea why. But now I understand that I can have this intergenerational conversation. And I want the young people particularly, because if I were in the audience, I would be throwing something or protesting or debating whoever speaks. That's what I did as a student. And when I saw this wonderful building next door for the diversity studies, it was just a reminder to me that how far we've come since my college days. And it's very different, and I hope the young people can understand it, because the young people today are probably under 30, and they probably have very little recognition or recollection at all of the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. They don't know about the explosion of the Challenger spaceship in the 1982-86. They don't even remember that in Tiananmen Square in China, there was a move for democracy that turned out to be unsuccessful. They're from a very different generation. They have no idea that popcorn used to be prepared in a pan. They never saw a typewriter. They never understood anything about black and white TV. It's a very different generation because I ask all the time. They don't have no idea, young people, right? They have no idea who shot JR. And they don't give a damn. And so it's a very different generation. And I know it's different than my generation because if I were to say Chicago, Alabama, Boston, they would think of those as places and not rock groups. And the way that I really know that there's a difference between my generation and the young people here today, and I'm going to try to divide the generation, in their lifetime, Michael Jackson was always white. I mean, it just goes to show. Notwithstanding that challenge, I'm going to try to have this conversation about race and where we are. And it is, in many respects, the best of times and worst of times. And I know, having grown up in that era, what it means now. I think it's remarkable, just remarkable, how people came together in 2008, black, white, male, female, Republican, Democrat, Independent, and voted for who they thought would be the best president of the United States, and they voted for Barack Obama in 2008. And it was an amazing event. And it followed on an interesting footstep as a moment of history. People also remember the great Martin Luther King and what he did in his lifetime. Born in 1929, assassinated in 1968, 39 years old. He's been dead longer than he lived. And yet today, with Black History Month and celebrating his birthday on January 15th, which is his actual birthday, and remembering his birthday on April 4th, 1968, the date that he was assassinated, it reminds us of what he contributed to our society and how important it is when we think about it as well. And I'm different now, having turned 60 on December 31st of last year, in 2012, because I know that I, too, had this odd feeling about hearing Dr. King's speech in 1963. When he gave that speech in Washington, D.C., it was a moving address that really captured the essence of the struggle. Now, I want you to go back and read it, not read the end, but read the entire speech. And there were two addresses he gave on August 28th, 1963. That date's important for a number of reasons. The first reason is that on August 27th, the day before the speech was given, the great W.B. Du Bois died, not as a citizen here in the United States, but in Africa, because he'd abandoned this country because he thought it was not going to do what it needed to do for someone of his stature trying to make a serious movement. And when he gave that address in 1963, it was very important because it captured what we were talking about. He talked about police brutality. He talked about the country writing a bad check. He talked about a Negro in Mississippi could not vote, and a Negro in New York had no one to vote for. That's what he told us in 1963. But then he stopped, and at the end of the speech, he gave what was the aspirational view about our society, which stays with us today. He asked us to judge his children, by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. That was a remarkable point for us all to appreciate. But he did more than that as well, because he asked all of us to understand what our challenges were going forward, what we had to do, and that's what we have to do in the year 2013. As we think about Black History Month, I also think about the difference between being over 60 years old and being just a teenager back then. I resented Black History Month. I believed then that there had to be a conspiracy. Why is Black History Month in the shortest month in the year? Right? Something's wrong. Why is Black History Month in February when it's cold and snowing outside? So I had all these conspiracy theories. There's something wrong with Black History Month. Why didn't they give us July or September? And I remember that I had the same issue in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was president. I was marching with Randall Robinson, had my son, who was a young kid born in 1976, on my shoulders. We were marching in Washington, D.C. for the King holiday. And it was January. And it was cold in Washington, D.C. But the whole idea was it's not about the weather, it's about the occasion. And we celebrated that occasion, and we celebrate Black History Month even now. As I think about where we've come, it is remarkable how much has changed, and we can't ignore the fact that we've had a wonderful transition from centuries of slavery. people of African descent who came here not as citizens, but at the bottom of the ship, working to try to liberate this sense of injustice and unfairness. People who were taken from their land, young, women who were raped, and they called it marriage, men who were beaten because they didn't work hard enough. And I remember watching, as a young man, and some of you might have seen it, I remember watching every single night the Roots series. Remember Roots when it was on TV? It was a very powerful recognition of what we'd come through. I didn't know whether to be angry or to be informed that we went from where we were. And yet, even today, if I see their reruns and I see this remarkable actor who came from Africa as Kunta Kinte, and they wanted to change his name to what? Toby, right? And I still shout at the TV, Kunta Kinte, Kunta Kinte. My wife says, Charles, come down. He's still going to be Toby no matter what you say. It's the same reel. We've seen this 20 times. But he should be Kunta Kinte. And I still say that to my children and to my grandchildren as well. But it tells us how far we've come from what Roots told us about, the legacy of American history and what it means for all of us. I think as well about what it means as we go forward and think about the sacrifices that people made for us to be here. I think about the amazing experience of Marlen Evers, who gave a wonderful, wonderful invocation at the inauguration in 2012, in this January 2013. It was powerful, and I just remember, here's this strong black woman from Mississippi giving this invocation, who decades earlier, in 1962, was in the front yard of her house in Mississippi when she saw the Klan assassinate and kill her husband, Medgar Evers. I think about that, think about how much progress we have made since to the early 1960s. I think about Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, the young black and white men who went down as part of the movement to try to change the view about race. And they were all killed by the Klan. I think about a white woman by the name of Viola Luiso, who was driving workers, the freedom marchers down through the South, who was her head was blown off by white Klan members who thought that she should not be, in a sense, trying to integrate America in the 1960s, and her tragic death. I think about all those deaths, Malcolm X, Dr. King, all those assassinations, what they mean. But I remember as well what you should remember, that on the day that Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, there was another wonderful American by the name of Robert Kennedy. He just won the Democratic nomination in the state of Indiana. And as they were applauding him for winning, he had to announce to a crowd in 1968, and I'm sad to report that just a few hours ago that Dr. King was assassinated. And the crowd was overwhelmed with sorrow and sadness. And then he said something that was pretty profound. He says, but let's not give up today. Because he said, I believe, 1968, that 40 years from now, that not only will we be able to celebrate Dr. King's life, but I believe, he said, that in America, this country will probably elect its first Negro as president. Well, in October 2008, 40 years later, Barack Obama was elected president in Washington, D.C. And we think about what that means, the legacy, the history of King being assassinated, of Bobby Kennedy being assassinated, of John F. Kennedy being assassinated, but they all were taking one step further for us to celebrate President Obama's success and how important it is. And I think it is important as well as we go forward. I think about it as well in terms of how we, in a sense, celebrate it now. And I remember being a very sort of angry student in college, taking these various classes and challenging all these authors. Many of them were African American, talking about the movement, etc. But they still didn't talk about what was really going on. And it was then that I met the person who was a great mentor and a great leader and who made my life what it is today. His name, which most students don't know, but I hope you'll Google him and study him. Some of your faculty know, and I've met some who are familiar with him and some who've ever even met him, is my mentor in college was Dr. Sinclair Drake. Wonderful African-American who traveled around the world, not just here, but he knew Kwame Nkrumah, he knew many of the African leaders before they were leaders. Young people he met in college and graduate school who went back to their countries and became presidents and premiers and leaders of these great countries. And he surprised me in the early 1970s, called me to his office, said, "Charles, I have a mission for you. I know you're only a freshman at Stanford, and you're going into your sophomore year, but I want you to go to Tanzania in Dar es Salaam, and I want you to deliver my papers. I'm not traveling. I've been to Africa many times. I want you to deliver my papers." And me, being the smart-ass student, said, "Well, Dr. Drake, I respect what you say, but I've never been to Africa, and I don't know if I can deliver an address with all these wonderful people in your paper." He said, "Charles, I'm not asking you to read my paper. I'm asking you to deliver it. That is, drop it off." And I was so embarrassed, but he was right. But he wanted me to have the experience of going to Africa, even if I could not be one of the speakers in the 6th Pan-African Congress in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And for me, it was another opening to see that we're not just from different parts of the country. And if you go back and watch the movie, and I hope you saw it, Boys in the Hood, there's an early debate in school. "We are from Africa," Trey said. Remember that? And his nemesis, who later became one of his best buddies, says, "No, we're not from Africa. I'm from Compton," right? And that's the psychology of a young child being born in Compton, thinking that he began there without understanding the roots that might have brought him all the way through ancestors from the great land of Africa to the city in Los Angeles of Compton. That's part of the history that we need to tell, and we must tell. And all that's important in terms of what we have to do in terms of understanding the importance of race. And we would not be here now if not for the great sacrifices, people marching. And I remember John Lewis getting beaten brutally as they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Alabama in 1963, beaten like a dog. And what makes it so significant is that is what the struggle was about. Sometimes you had to pay with your body. And now he's in Congress, but he says he's forgiven the man who beat him. He's forgiven the man who spit in his face when he went to a restaurant. He's forgiven all those people because he believes that now, the 21st century, we're in a very different place. I remember after King's speech, I remember his relationship with Lyndon Baines Johnson, one of the greatest presidents in the history of America. It may take us a generation to appreciate how important Johnson was. From Texas, from the South, a very much a Southern Democrat, but had his own vision. What did he do? It's because of Johnson, who followed the assassination of Kennedy, we had the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Because of Johnson, we had the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Because of Johnson, we have the 1968 Public Accommodations Act. We had the Fair Housing Act. We had all of these things that happened when people, black and white, came together to make an enormous amount of difference in the 1960s. And I think that's very important and very significant. And I look at us today and where we are today, it's a remarkable difference. We have African Americans who are CEOs like Ken Chenault at American Express. We have wonderful Ursula Burns at Xerox. We have people who are presidents of universities, who are head of academic institutions, who are important leaders in business. We have people who are achieved so much in so many different categories that makes us that much even more successful. And we see a caucus in Washington that's very diverse, that's black and brown and male and female. It makes an enormous amount of difference where we are. And then I think back to this kid who came to me at Harvard Law School in the 1980s. And when I say this kid, I'm not talking about Barack Obama. I'll talk about him later. I'm talking about the real smart one, Michelle Obama. She came to Harvard in 1985. And she was someone who had been pushed by her father, who died much too young, and her mother, but like her brother Craig, to go on to Princeton University. And not just to go to Princeton, but to succeed. And that's what he had in his mind in the late 70s. They should go to college and do well. And then she came to Harvard Law School, and she was one of the smartest people around Harvard Law School, professional, organized, and she was a student in the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau. That's the Public Interest Law Bureau. She represented poor people in Boston in court in legal matters who couldn't afford a lawyer, and she was one of the best student lawyers ever imagined. That's what she did. She made a career as a law student out of being a great second year and third year public interest civil lawyer. Won case after case, public accommodations in terms of housing, in terms of welfare benefits, in terms of any civil matter that came before her. She was very exceptional. And I'm not going to publicly say in an audience like this that she is much smarter than President Obama. I'm not going to say that. And you didn't hear that Michelle Obama is smarter than President Obama. I'm not going to say that Michelle Obama is much smarter than President Obama. I'm not going to say that, so you can't trick me into saying that. And then he did come to Harvard, and they never met at Harvard. She was there from 1985 and graduated in June 1988, went back to Chicago and worked in doing the community. And then he came from first, I know some of you think he was born in Kenya. He was actually born in Hawaii. I know you want his birth certificate. He was born in Hawaii, right? He came from Hawaii, studied in California, went to college, finished his college at Columbia, and then came to Harvard in 1988. He never met Michelle because she'd already graduated. He was really the smartest student at Harvard University. And I say that to just give people a sense, well, where did Barack Obama come from? Well, if you think about it, it's a story that doesn't make sense. You know who he is now, Hawaii, senator, president, re-elected president, really accomplished. It looks very significant. But what's amazing is that Barack Obama, if you think about it, Barack Obama's father was an African from Kenya who he only met once in his lifetime. His mother was a white woman from Topeka, Kansas, who raised him, and she was pregnant as a teenager. And because she was trying to go to school and could not completely care for him, you'll see that he moved around, not just around the neighborhood or even around the state, but he moved around the world with relatives and other folks. And I'm going to ask you today, what happens to an African-American male born in 1961, whose father he saw once, whose mother was pregnant as a teenager, and who moved around the country? You would say that that person today is one of three things. What? Dead, on drugs, or in jail. But I have to tell you, this person, Barack Hussein Obama, is now at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. Thank you. That's a sign of progress, and I think you should understand that when he makes that move. And I had this great discussion with President Obama. He calls me Tree, and I call him Barack. In 1991, as he was about to graduate, he was trying to decide what to do. And he came to me very honestly, Tree, I want to talk to you. And he was one who always came to my class. And he was not in my classes, but I taught a Saturday school class as a special effort to get students to think about preparing cases, how to argue cases, how to take exams, how to brief cases, how to study, how to write legal arguments. And he was one of the most exceptional people there. And he always sat in the front row. As smart as he was, he didn't need the Saturday school, but he was always there. And he always answered the questions brilliantly that I would raise or another faculty would raise. But he did something else that was sort of annoying. After he'd answer the question, he would say, Professor, I think that you really understand the important argument that I made, but Clara really made it clear when she talked about the transactional analysis that really has a binding on this. And Bob really understood the nuances of the different models that you talked about. He understood all four of the models. And Sally, she was really outstanding in understanding the ultimate issues and the ultimate. And Bob, when you think about him, he really, I said, Barack, am I teaching this class or you? Give me a little bit of respect here, right? But then he said he was going to leave, and he had choices. You think about this, someone who came to Harvard Law School with this interesting background, and you talk about what history means. He left there after being elected the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review. That's a very important position. President, the top person of the Harvard Law Review. He also was one of the top academic students, A's, A minuses throughout his years at Harvard. And so he came to me in 1991 and said, Tree, I have a question for you. Can I give up the commitment I made to the people of Chicago, because I told them I was going to come back and get involved again in community organizing. He says, I've earned the right to clerk for any Supreme Court justice. That's what the president of Harvard Law Review does. I've earned the right to work at any law firm in Chicago, in Washington, in New York, and make $100,000 a year in 1991. I could make that kind of money. I've earned that right. But can I take those positions when I made a promise to people that I'm going to go back to Chicago? Can I go back to Chicago and give these honors up? And I thought about it long and hard and said, Barack, yes, you can. I say that for a reason. Barack Obama hasn't given me any credit at all. But I'm not angry about that. I'm not really angry about that. I'm beyond it. When he says, yes, you can, yes, we can, it goes to another point, which is about right now. The reality is that we've elected 2 times an African-American president. And yet, when you think about where we are, the complexity of post-racial America, we can celebrate having 1 black man in the White House. But at the same time, we have to mourn having over 1 million black men in prison. We can celebrate the diversity of our Congress. There are more than 20 women senators now, more than ever in the history, and 120 women in the House of Representatives. That, to me, is unthinkable generations ago. But when you think about the folks who are homeless, who are black and brown and yellow around this country, there's something wrong with the picture. We can celebrate the fact that we have had our first African-American Attorney General, Eric Holder. That's the mind-boggling. We can celebrate the fact that we had the first woman ever, even though women are more than half of the legal profession, the first woman ever to be the Solicitor General, the nation's top lawyer, was Elena Kagan, who now is on the Supreme Court. We can celebrate the fact that this time, for the first time in our history, we have 3 women, 1 Latina, who are members of the Supreme Court. They should be 4, 5, or 6, but we've got 3 as opposed to none or 1. That's a celebration of what we've done. And yet we still see women who are abused, who are homeless, who are jobless. And that's what we have to face in the 21st century. That's part of the challenge. And so it's time to celebrate, but let's not forget what we are experiencing today. We can celebrate our progress, but we should look around and beyond us and see that there is still suffering. There's still poverty. There's still undereducation. There's still homelessness. There's still mental challenges that people are facing. There still is the fact that we don't even accept and embrace the fact that people are diverse. And I'm not talking about just race and gender. I'm talking about sexual orientation. The whole idea that we have to recognize that people are different. They are still Americans. They are still part of our society. And we have to embrace every single one, because all of us, in one respect or another, except Native Americans who were here, all of us are immigrants. We're all living on borrowed time. When Emma Lazarus says, give me, you're sick, you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to be free, we thought they was talking about Europe, but that's the whole world that came to America. That's why we call the United States of America. And I think that that's what we have to capture today. And I'm of the old school of Thurgood Marshall and his views about these issues. This is not a society where we should embrace what's called a melting pot. I don't argue against that concept, but I'm not a melting pot kind of guy. A melting pot means lose your identity. I want your identity. I want the Latina. I want the Asian American. I want the Native American. I want the person who's transgender. I want all of that because that's all of us. And we're not the melting pot generation, we're the salad bowl generation. Because a good salad has tomatoes and lettuce and carrots and cucumbers and onions, some of you, and the president, was it arugula, whatever he eats. I don't eat it. But the whole idea is that all of that makes it a wonderful salad. And that's who we are, the diversity of what we bring, every kind of diversity. And I know that because I know my grandchildren won't have an ounce of ism in their history. 12, 8, 4, and the youngest is 5 months old now. They don't know the gender and race and sexual orientation and class. They don't understand that. They will if we teach them. They will learn to hate if we teach them. But now all they believe in is love. And I think that's a glorious thing that we have to do. We're on this precipice where we can make an enormous amount of difference in the 21st century. We can make it happen for all of us in a very big way. And I think that's what this lecture is about. I want to end by saying this. Some of you have seen this book, and I'm going to say a few words about it. It's called The Presumption of Guilt. I know there's some pre-law students here. There is no such thing as the presumption of guilt. That's true. That's why I named it The Presumption of Guilt. So you would read it and say, wait, what is it? What the heck is he talking about? I'm talking about the arrest of Henry Louis Gates Jr. in race, class, and crime in America. All those are parts of what the book talks about. And it talks about the presumption of guilt because some people are presumed guilty because of the way they look, the color of their skin, how they dress, where they live, where they're walking, jogging, sleeping, eating, all those things. We make judgments about people. And that presumption is what I think is a harmful aspect of our society. The book I wrote before this, I've written 8 books, but one before this, the third or fourth book, in 2004, was celebrating the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, published in 2004, 50 years after Brown. And it was called All Deliberate Speed. And I called it that because I read the Brown case very closely. And what the Supreme Court said by a Harvard-educated justice was that we're going to integrate our public schools. Black and white children will be able to go to school together. And we're going to integrate them with all deliberate speed. Those 3 words you have to read in the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education, because I read them and said, wait a minute. And Thurgood Marshall thought he'd won the case in 1954 because of 52, 53 when they decided, and 54 when it was published. And he went out celebrating. And then the secretary, of course, African-American woman, said, I just looked at the dictionary, Mr. Marshall, and deliberate means slow. Yeah, we're going to integrate with all deliberate speed, which meant not fast at all. And then, please don't tell him I said this, but in 1993, our new president, Bill Clinton, it's been 20 years, so it's in this book, and I hope he hasn't read it yet. But I quote him. He used the term, I'm going to get rid of discrimination against gays, and as president, I'm going to do it with all deliberate speed. Well, he did. He didn't do it in his 2 terms. So that was all deliberate speed, which meant it was slow. That's not what he meant, but that's what he said. And it's just a reminder from my point of view what we have to do in terms of trying to reach the challenges of the 21st century. Now, I don't mean this to be depressing, but a reality that we have an obligation as members of this community, all of us, to do some things that make an enormous amount of difference. We have to lift as we climb. I am where I am not because of what I've done, but because somebody else somewhere opened up the doors for me. I don't even know who they are. Every time I speak, I give thanks to people who went to HBCUs like Howard University, like Spelman College, like Morehouse College, like Fisk. You can name them, like Florida A&M. You can name all of them. Those folks built the ground upon which I stand because they went to the HBCUs and had demonstrations so that I could go to a place like Stanford. It didn't matter what my grades were. It didn't matter how smart I was in high school. I would never have gone to Stanford if somebody had not been in the march before that in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so that's what we have to appreciate. We are who we are because someone else made that possible. And that's why even today, I don't have to, but I give scholarships every single year to students who go to the same high schools I went to, black, brown, white. And who do I give them to? I don't give them to the straight A student. They're going to get scholarships. Who do I give them to? I look at a student's transcript. And somebody who struggled to get a C in their freshman year and got a B minus to a B in their sophomore year and got a B plus in their junior year and had B plus, A minus in their senior year, that's somebody who shows what? Potential. All they needed is for somebody to open up the door. And so that's the whole philosophy. I'm not going to give another scholarship to the smartest person, with all apologies, but I'm going to give it to somebody who I know with a little bit of a hand up, not a handout, they can make a big difference in the world. And I'm hoping that some way they will see that as a sign. I went back to my hometown in 2005 when they opened up the new 10th University of California in Merced, of all places, and gave the speech there. And when they introduced me, like tonight, they said, you know, an honors graduate from Stanford University, a graduate of Harvard Law School, and a tenured professor at Harvard Law School now, and started at the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute. And all these students in Merced who were at this college said, where did you grow up? I said, here. I went to Merced High. No, you didn't. Stanford, Harvard? Where did you really grow up? No, Merced High. Prove it, right? And I had to actually show them 1240 Home Avenue. That's where I live, which is the ghetto now. Right? But the whole idea is to make them think that no matter where you come from, it doesn't say that you can't succeed. You can't make a difference. You can't be someone who can be a change agent in this game of politics and of reality. And that's what I tried to do in my time, in my lifetime. And I see that even now in terms of what I want to do ultimately. When I wrote this book about Professor Gates, it was the irony of all things. It happened in 2010. Professor Gates grew up in West Virginia, went to a segregated high school, graduated with honors from Yale University, PhD from Yale, has been a tenured professor at Harvard, owns a chair at Harvard, is a university professor, which is the highest honor one could receive. And yet he found on July 16, 2010, he was just another African-American male trying to get in his house without his keys, and a neighbor called the police saying, looks like he's breaking in that house. And what's amazing about it is that he showed the police officer, and it's in the book, 2 forms of IDs. Now, which ironic, I put them in the order they showed them. What did he show them first? Harvard ID, right? That's about class. Look at this. Harvard ID, Henry Louis Gates Jr., university professor, Harvard University. And then he said, look at this, driver's license, Henry Louis Gates Jr., 17 Ware Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts, a valid driver's license. And the officers just looked at him, and then Gates said 5 things. 5 things. Think about this, about the sense of where we've come. The first thing he said to this police officer who came into his house in response to it, he said, do you know who I am? Class, right? Do you know who I am? Second thing, got a little angry, still in his house. Do you know who you're messing with? The officer just kept looking at his IDs. And the third thing says, are you doing this because I'm a black man and you're a white man? Uh-oh. Sergeant Crowley looked up then. He says, and his fourth thing he said was, this is what happens to a black man in America. The most histrionic I've ever seen Gates in his life. Right? Then the last thing he said was, I want your name and your badge number. I'm going to file a complaint. I've been teaching about 30 years at Harvard, and the first thing I teach my students is, if you're ever in a situation where you're going to be arrested, never, ever, never tell a police officer you're going to file a complaint. Never ask for his name or badge number, because you can see his name on the suit, and you can read his badge number and remember it for later, right? It's obviously to me that Professor Gates didn't take my class. And so he gets arrested. But why is he arrested? Because the officer then says, sir, I'm not going to continue this conversation with you. If you want to continue it, I will meet you outside of the house. Gates not a lawyer. And so the police officer walks out, going about his business, so to speak. And Gates says, I'm not through with you. Gates right behind him, arguing. And then the police officer says, aha, you're outside. Thanks for finding my request. You're under arrest. Locked him up. Right? And that's the book tells you none of us are safe from this. And if you read the whole book, if you look at the last section of the book, it has 100 ways of looking at a black man. Because after Gates' arrest, I received letters, faxes, emails, a whole series of calls from people, and they were all, largely all black professional men. You know what they told me? Tree, that happened to me. And this book recounts stories from Vernon Jordan to Charles Hamilton, not to Charles Hamilton, to John Hope Franklin, to Eric Holder, our Attorney General. Everybody had a story. Vernon Jordan had a story about what it meant being a black man, that they hadn't risen above their class. They were still being judged by their race. And it's not to be angry because this is not anti-police, but the reality is that people are judged by how they look, what they wear, where they are, and how they react. And Gates was arrested that day and charged. He was arrested for what? It really was, disturbing the peace? No, he was arrested for contempt of cop. He made the cop mad. And the police officer, who I know well, went to the same school that my children went to in Cambridge, the police officer, in a sense, was mad too, and used that to make it happen. And so it's a reminder that even though we're in the 21st century, these things can still happen. And then, of course, we thought it was all over, but how did it end? Well, I told Gates to be quiet, not to say a word, and he, in a sense, honored that request. He says, I won't say a word, I'm just going to keep quiet. And then I get a call from the New York Times that, Professor Ogletree, we'd like to talk to you about Professor Gates' arrest. I said, well, the charge has been dropped, I have no comment. Well, do you want to comment on the statement your client gave to us this morning? I said, hold on. Skip. Hey, Tree, did you call the New York Times and give them a statement? No, man, that's a lie. I didn't give them a statement. I gave them some background information, and I did not give a statement. We resolved that, right? And then the next day on the blog, there's an article called An Interview with My Father, the Jailbird, by Liza Gates. I called again. Skip, did you give your daughter an interview about your arrest? Who? Your daughter, Liza. Oh, no, I didn't give her an interview. We just talked. I said, Skip, I'm reading question, answer. Oh, she wrote that down? And then he got quiet, and then the next day on national TV, you may remember this. Remember the president did a wonderful 59-minute, I say 59-minute, it's an hour press conference, a 59-minute press conference about health care, about why important it was on July 23rd to pass the Health Care Act that he was ultimately able to pass. And I asked, and the last question from Lynn Sweet from the Chicago Sun-Times was this. Mr. President, do you have any comments on the arrest of your Henry Louis Gates Jr.? He said, well, first, I should say Professor Gates is my friend. The second, I have to tell you that I don't know all the facts. I didn't put it in the book. I thought about it. I wanted to say, Mr. President, then you should shut up if you don't know all the facts. But my wife took that out the book. It's not in the book. I'm telling you what I said. You should shut up, Mr. President. But she said I shouldn't put that in the book about the president. And the third thing he says was that there is a history of African Americans being arrested. And he went on to say that in this case, he said 5 words, the Cambridge police acted stupidly. 5 words. But the whole sentence is, the Cambridge police acted stupidly when you arrest a man in his own house after he's shown you IDs. All the public heard was those first 5 words. And he realized then that he'd made a huge mistake and that there's no way out of it. And then he had the beer summit. Do you remember that? Right. But he was smart enough to get it off the front page. It took a week, but 2 weeks before it was off the front page. But the point of this is that no matter who you are, no matter how far you climb, you celebrate the fact that we are in America in the 21st century. But you also celebrate the fact, and mourn the fact in some respects, that we still have to make sure how careful we are and where we go. And I would say in conclusion this, that I think about the great sacrifices that have been made by others who preceded us. And I think about one song, and I'm not going to sing it, but the words just make a whole lot of sense. To talk about how far we've come and yet how far we have to go, and how we have to be committed to ancestors. And the song says, I don't feel no ways tired because I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy, but I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. And that is a song of somebody who has survived struggle and challenges and still has the faith that makes a big difference. And so for young people, as we see them, it's up to us to say, when the young brother or sister of whatever race or ethnicity comes to you and says, can I be president? You have to say, yes, you can. Can I be an astrosurgeon? Yes, you can. Can I work in my community as an organizer? Yes, you can. Can I lift my family up? Yes, you can. That has to be our word. Yes, you can. And if we say that enough times in enough places to enough people, we will make sure that the young people who follow us will say, dear friend, dear relative, dear mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, let that rope down because I want to climb up there and be where you are. And we're going to say, oh, that's right. Yes, you can. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Rebecca, can I take a few questions?
Thank you so much, Professor Ogletree, and thank you for being an outstanding speaker for our Black History Month. We're going to take a few questions, so if you would like to, there's going to be 3 students out in the audience, so if you'd like to ask Professor Ogletree a question, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Do we have someone who would like to ask a question? Yes.
Microphone.
And could you please state your name and where you come from, or if you're a student, could you please state your major? Thank you.
I'm definitely not a student. I'm a faculty member, URI Theater, and I have with me some students here from my script analysis class. My name is Bryna Wortman, and I mean no disrespect with the question I'm going to ask. Mm-hmm. But you've been very forthright, and I loved everything you said, and I'm old enough to know everything that you said, to be acquainted with it. I think I just want to ask one little question, because I know the event with Dr. Gates and the policeman, followed it very carefully and was horrified. But I guess I just would like to know your own personal opinion before it became so exaggerated and off the wall because of the anger and the defensiveness. Do you think that a neighbor hearing and seeing a white man trying to juggle open the lock of the door would have been, that the police would have been called in that instance?
Now, it's very interesting. That I'm going to answer this from personal experience.
Yes.
And then I'll answer from professional experience. Where I live in Cambridge, my house was burglarized twice by white folks. My neighbor was white. And his response was, "Oh, I didn't know that they were breaking into your house. I thought they worked there." It never even occurred to him that they might be breaking in. And they're going out with my wife's jewelry, with a toaster, anything you can carry in your hand, a remote control. And so my own experiences, it happened twice. I think that's anecdotal, not, in a sense, empirical. But here's what the issue is. I think that anybody should have called, and what I put in this book, and you should take a look at it, is the actual transcript, because the woman who called was not the woman who first saw it, right? She just had a phone. And I think it's very important, and I put in here exactly what she said, because I think it answers the question in a very profound way. She called the dispatcher, and here's what she said. She says in this call that I don't know what's happening. I just have an elder woman standing here, and she had noticed two gentlemen trying to get in the house at that number, 17 Ware Street. And they kind of had to barge in, and they broke the screen door. And she went on to say, I noticed two suitcases, what they brought with them. So I'm not sure if these are two individuals who actually worked there or who lived there. That's what she said. And so the witness who was calling was not making any presumption. I made that very clear. And the police officer, dispatcher, asked the right question. Black or Hispanic? Are they still in the house? Black or Hispanic? That was his first words, right? And her response was, I think they're still in the house. She says there are two large men. One looked kind of Hispanic, but I'm not sure. And the other one entered, right? So she doesn't have the race. The police officer's report says, I talked to the woman, and she said two black males carrying backpacks, which was not true. She never, only because of the electronic tape that we know what she actually said. And I say in the book, this woman, Lucia Whalen, is a hero, not someone who profiled. The press got it wrong. Everybody made her like the snitching woman from the neighborhood. But I saw her as somebody who was saying, I'm not making any judgments. I'm telling you what I see, and you decide what to do. And that's why I put the entire transcript so there won't be any misjudgment about that. I think that the call would have been made if the person were black or white in her circumstances, and she would have done the same thing. I'll describe the race, and she would say the same thing. I don't know if they work there or live there, but I'm telling you what I see in case you want to investigate. So that's what I would say about that.
So you're saying that it was the police that reversed it?
The police, what happens is the police reverse it only in this sense, that the police got mad when Gates showed him the ID, because Gates was arrogant. But nothing Gates, let me back up a little bit. Gates received an enormous amount of criticism for this arrest from blacks and whites, poor blacks and wealthy blacks, because they were saying, who does he think he is? Because he'd never been arrested. He had his way with police. He could do all these things, but in a sense, they saw this as a class issue. Who does he think he is? He's trying to get beyond the race. And they were saying, why is he upset? It happens to us all the time. And so that's the complex issue, that the race-class issue is what I talked about in the book a lot, because it showed that there was a different issue. And I think it would have happened whether the person was black or white. I think people dislike Gates, and a lot of people still dislike Gates, whether they admit it or not. And I think they think that because he got me, right, he got a lawyer within seconds, got the charges dismissed, which should have been dismissed anyway. They thought that he got this favorable treatment that might have made a big difference.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll take another question. Yes, this gentleman right here.
Somebody in the back, too.
My name's Ed Crane. I'm studying communications. And my question deals with, you mentioned class a lot, and we had the Occupy Wall Street last year. Yeah. And I was wondering if you found that the class battle is a relevant battle, and is there any association to the civil rights battles that happened?
The answer is absolutely. If you think about the civil rights battle, people keep forgetting that even though one of Dr. King's requirements, I want you to put on your best shoes and your best suit for this demonstration. Very odd, right? But he didn't want people looking like, they're just coming from some messy place or they're unprofessional. So people were dressing up in demonstrations. We don't see that as much as that now. And so the class issue was there because people looked like they were professional. Look at the photographs of men. I am a man, all wearing a hat, all wearing a suit, all wearing polished shoes, even though they have to walk miles. And almost every time you see King, he's wearing a suit, right? And so that's part of it. Even though the movement was largely working class people, right? And what made it successful as he moved on, it went from being black to being very diverse. If you look at the March on Washington, it was one of the most diverse crowds you've ever seen in Washington. The whole idea was that he was not appealing to just African Americans, but to all Americans that have a sense that if you're part of this movement, it makes a big difference. Occupy Wall Street, it's very interesting. There was, because I talked about, I have a radio program I'm on every Wednesday, and it's interesting. There was a movement, I wouldn't say contrary to, but I would say maybe supportive of, but distinct from Occupy Wall Street. It was called Occupy the Hood, right? Because a lot of the Occupy Wall Street was in front of investment banks, all the right places, the targets of money, right? And they're saying, well, we need to change what's happening in our neighborhoods because that's where we don't have jobs. And so it's not just the financial institutions, that's one place, but it also has to be places that we need to go, the banks that might be able to give us a loan, mortgage companies that might be able to give us, help us get a home, educational institutions, but it was a much broader event as well. I was shocked and surprised I didn't have enough people of color, but I did see some diverse efforts around. For instance, at Harvard, the students of all races and political views circled the Harvard yard, and then the administration says they blocked it. They were in front of gates. I wouldn't call it a blockage, but the whole point was all of us, we're paying what, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 a year for tuition. But they were giving that all up to be part of Occupy Wall Street. And so I think that's what happened. I just wish the one thing that seemed to be part of Occupy Wall Street was we don't have a leader, right? We're all equal. And maybe that is different from a movement. The movement would not have succeeded if King didn't lead it. It's not that he didn't say I'm the leader. He was pushed to be the leader. There had to be a face of somebody. And remember, King was not a politician. He was a minister, a full-time minister who virtually gave up his destiny in terms of religion to become a movement person. And that's why Johnson took his calls. Johnson called him. Johnson consulted on the 64 Civil Rights Act, the 65 Voting Rights Act. Johnson made sure that he had a regular dialogue. Even though you didn't see King at the White House a lot, at this point, I'll call you, I'll talk to you. I can't go to the White House for tea. That's not my image. And I'm going to tell you what I think you need to do before we do this next march. And I think that's what makes a big difference. I wish Occupy Wall Street would come back, and maybe it has. But I think with the idea that it really has an important role now with poverty, with homelessness, with lack of jobs, with inadequate housing, inadequate education. It's an agenda there waiting for a movement, and I just hope it happens.
I believe there's a question in the back. Question in the back? This gentleman right here. Yep.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh,
Hi. I'm Amaris. I'm a freshman and a theater major. I'm here with my professor and my other friends. So what has inspired you to get where you are today?
There are three things. Grandparents. When I say grandparents, I mean mentors, anybody. My grandmother had no formal education at all, coming from Arkansas, none. And she would have me read the Bible to her. And being the smart kid that I thought I was, I would say, it's getting late. I don't have time to read all this. I need to go watch some TV, black and white TV. I would skip a verse. She'd say, no, Junior, you skipped a verse. I'm saying, how the heck did she know that I skipped a verse? Because she was making sure that I read the Bible not for me, not for her, but for me. to make sure I understood what the words were. So she was someone who couldn't teach me, couldn't do my homework, couldn't help me with my homework, but was a mentor in that respect as well. The second, it's hard to say this, a lot of people who hung around with me who were my age and older, they kept me out of harm's way. I'm very lucky. I'm extremely lucky, and I praise God today to be lucky, because they said, hey, you don't need to go in here. Hey, you don't need to be in this room. Hey, you don't need to be in this car. They had all these things because I was the egghead, and I didn't know that I was in the wrong room, the wrong house, the wrong car, but they did. That's not where, and that made a big difference. And the third thing was the mentors in school. It's amazing. I don't think it happens now, and I talk about it so people understand that it's real. I had 3 teachers that I remember very well. My kindergarten teacher was a white woman, and one day she gave me a note and said, Charles, kindergarten, I want you to go to the principal's office. What did I do in kindergarten? But she sent me to the principal's with a note, and the note was to give him a shower, and here's some new clothes. Give me these clothes. So she recognized my poverty and realized I hadn't taken a bath probably in a month because of the poverty we grew up in. And she had the foresight to move me into a place that I could be educated and dress well. In the 4th grade, I had an African-American teacher, and there's very few male teachers, that most of them were women. And he gave me a note one day at 11 o'clock, and he said, take this to Mr. Roberts. And I thought it was a note from him to Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts read it, and he said, sit down. Mr. Roberts owned a barber shop, and he shaved cut my hair, right? Because my hair was nappy and dirty, and I hadn't thought about it. That's just the way I lived, right? And he was doing something that made an enormous amount of difference in that rate. And the third was a white woman who I mentioned in passing, Miss Jackson, who was my guidance counselor in high school, and she's the one who had got a degree from Stanford, who persuaded me to go to Stanford. Not my parents; they wouldn't know where it was. I didn't know where it was. But those people like that who come in your life accidentally, and maybe intentionally, but made an enormous amount of difference. And so that became my motivation. I started reading books. I started going places. I stayed out of harm's way and still stay out of harm's way. And I think that made an enormous amount of difference. And that is, there's a song, we fall down, but we get up. A saint is just a sinner who's fell down but got up. And that to me has a big value in the sense that in any endeavor, you fail many times before you succeed. And I started learning, failure is on the way to success, as opposed to assuming I'm going to be successful at everything I do the first time I do it. I learned the hard way, and that made an enormous amount of difference. So when I see, that's why I give to students who are moderately successful as opposed to who are incredibly successful. The whole idea is that they might have had a difficult time before, but give them the opportunity, and they might make it. So that's what it is. And the reality is that I've seen students who come to my classes who are in their teens, who are too young for law school, but they come, and they do incredibly well. I see people who are in their late 20s, like Barack Obama was. I thought he was old for most students, but he did well. I see students who are 40, who are first-year law students. Incredible difference. And that late bloomers make a big difference. So my sense is that don't give up on yourself too soon and take all this mentoring from wherever it comes. It makes an enormous amount of difference in life.
We'll take a couple more questions, gentlemen, and right there in the middle.
Hi, my name is DeAndre Mitchell. I'm a political science major at the university. And I just wanted to know if you can speak on the state of this image and this idea of black men in the media and the news, specifically Sean Hannity and Andrew Breitbart and all those individuals who, I just don't understand why there's just this vitriol and this hatred and this, subversive, messaging and whatnot.
My sense is that, well, let me just answer in a different way. And my wife just hates it. I watch Fox News all the time. And she's just mad. She, go upstairs. Don't be watching Fox News. And I'll go upstairs. There's another TV upstairs, right? Because I want to know what they think, right? And to come full circle, the day after election, we were up all night watching election results in 2012 when everybody thought Mitt Romney was going to win. And I thought Mitt Romney, I knew what the numbers were because I worked with the campaign. And I turned on the TV at 6 o'clock because I wanted to see Fox News. And my wife said, oh, let me see. And she got there, watch it, and she said, I just want to see their faces. and it was like it was a party. It was a celebration. You can't smile when you know you won. You know that you stopped Obama and all the negative arguments worked. And despite the polls, you know that Romney's very popular. And it was a wonderful thing. So I look at it as an educational experience. I show some of the clips in class. Hannity's come after me on a couple of times and called me all sorts of names. And I never refuse to do an interview with Bill O'Reilly, any of them, because my sense is that what I have to say isn't going to change. And I have some things that they might think are conservative and not all liberal and progressive, and I happily do that. So my sense is that I'm not going to change them. But have you seen the Fox ratings, how they're going down? I mean, it's very interesting. And I keep saying, wait a minute, I watch every day. Why are they going down? Something. Where are my peeps, right? The reality is I think people are disappointed because they thought it was a movement that was going to galvanize support throughout a lot of places. But it's faded in a very significant way. I still watch it because I think it's important everybody should get both sides of the issue, even if you know what your views are going to be, because I think it makes for a much more hearty and useful exchange when you hear what people like Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, and others like that say as well.
We're going to take one more question. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Priscilla De Silva. I'm just a resident of Rhode Island. I was wondering if, it's a two-part question, I was wondering if when President Barack Obama was at Harvard, if you've ever thought, wow, that would make a great president of the United States, and also what characteristics did you see in him back then that make him an incredible president now?
Well, I'm going to answer the first question, the last question first. I saw in him a collaborator, which is not a politician, right? I mean, the whole idea that he would, as I demonstrated, embrace every point of view, even if they were different from his, and that's what made him a very successful president of Harvard Law Review. It made him a very successful state senator, a very successful United States senator, and I think a successful president. So the collaboration is a big part of it. He's actually an introvert. And just go, you can Google it or go check it out, but see if I saw him last night in Minnesota, I think he was, gave an address about some issue. I can't remember the issue, but what was it on last night? Guns, okay. But if you watch him go, he's very happy jumping up on stage. And if you see him with the person who introduces him, you'll see him give a hug, but you'll see a pat on the back. There's no of the bear hug, right? Michelle will knock you out with the bear hug. I know I've been saying, Michelle, let me go. I'm your friend. Oh, I just love you, President. But he's very much an introvert and doesn't do all that sort of touchy-feely stuff. And I think that's just his personality. I think he wishes he could be differently, but I think that becomes part of the problem. And what's the first part again? Well, I know it's very interesting. Now, it's easy, particularly since Rebecca's reported, of course I knew he was going to be president. That would be a complete lie. I've said 100 times, and I'll say again tonight, when I saw his talents and gifts and abilities, I was convinced that he was going to be the best damn mayor in the history of America. And he does not like me saying that, but that's true. He says, man, you really downgraded me. I said, look, man, you married up. Come on now. He did, right? But the whole idea was that mayors are very important people who do a lot of things that we don't know, who make a big difference. I think I don't mean to be disrespectful to governor, senator, legislative person, president, none of those folks, but mayors are people who people rely on to do amazing stuff at the local level, and that's what I thought he would be, a great mayor. And it wasn't that he wouldn't become those other things, but and remember, this is late 80s and early 90s, and so my vision wasn't like Bobby Kennedy said 40 years from now you'd have the first African-American president. I think many of us were all too satisfied in 1990 when we thought Bill Clinton was the first black president. But we came to appreciate the fact that there was really somebody who was of African descent who turned out to be president.
Charles, there's going to be one more question right here for this.
I think there are two more because this woman's been up for a long time.
All right.
And then the orange hat, or whatever color that hat is. Yep. Yes.
Is that me? Oh, okay. You spoke earlier about going from a melting pot to a tossed salad, from going from needing the leadership of Dr. King to the Occupy Wall Street movement where it's more dispersed. And it seems that in terms of changing the world, we're maybe coming towards a more egalitarian view of addressing these problems. What would be your advice in terms of addressing some of the limitations of not having such a focused, one clear face, but a chopped salad trying to change the world?
I believe in the chopped salad, or the salad bowl, just because I believe in diversity. And I believe in, and I wouldn't say that I had this firm beliefs before. I believe in integration, whatever that means. But the whole idea, and mainly that means I want to be in the crowd. Integration isn't a person of color in a sea of whiteness. That's not integration. It is technically, but it's not realistically, and that means real diversity, that you have to have the numbers that make a difference of every race and ethnicity and sexual orientation. That's what makes the difference. And I think that's where we're going. And I say that for this reason. I was very surprised. I taught 3 years ago when I was on sabbatical. I taught for a few months in southern China. I was amazed, let me put it that way, by the level of enthusiasm that people with billions of people in a country, the enthusiasm for Barack Obama. Everywhere you went there, his books were there, and they even talked about if you really want to learn how to speak American English, read Barack Obama's books. They had books everywhere. And I even saw one of my books, All Deliberate Speed, there, and I made a mistake. I saw it, and I said, I got to get a picture of this. And I called my publisher in New York and said, hey, I'm so happy. I'm here at this bookstore in Beijing, and my book, All Deliberate Speed, is here. And it's in English. I said, thank you. And Bob said, Tree, we didn't send your book to China. I said, no, I see it right here. Tree, we didn't have any books sent to China. I said, Bob, Tree. I said, oh, the cover does look a little different than the one that you published, but the words there were no mistakes. And so that became part of the experience of the world embracing Obama. And I said to someone earlier, Barack Obama's brother, who he knows, but his father had several children, his Kenyan father. One went to school in Amherst, Massachusetts, and then went to China to teach Chinese citizens English because he was very fluent in English. And the name Obama was so popular, they created a series. If you go to China, all around the country, they'll say, what they call it something else. It's not they call it barbecue, but it says Obama's barbecue pit, right? And his brother, his blood brother, his half brother, has these places around China. And I said, man, I didn't know that you ate pork. He says, I mean, I don't eat meat at all. but they wanted my name, and they paid me to be Obama's barbecue pit. So they're barbecue pits with Obama's name because they love it all over China. And everybody was eating. I went to 3 different families' homes. Oh, have some Obama barbecue. I said, oh, here we go. But it tells you how it carries and what an important thing it was. And so I saw that diversity. I mean, here's a country that knows very few people of color outside of Asia in terms of individuals. But they embraced Obama and anything about Obama that made a big difference in terms of and that's why I embraced the salad bowl theory, that everybody seems to embrace the idea that as different as we are, we make an enormous amount of judgments that make all the right decisions going forward. This, yeah.
Okay.
Last question.
Last question.
My name is Charles. I'm Kim Engineering. My question is, how do we move along with diversity and then stay core today? You know, we new generation, but still core to the roots, like what we know from our old folks, like parents, grandparents. So how do we embrace diversity, but at the same time stay true to the true value that you grew up with?
It's very interesting. I embrace diversity because I've experienced its values in my classes, number one, and in my community, in my neighborhood. I have to say we can learn a lot by not just teaching children, but listening to them. And I have to tell you that I've learned a lot about diversity from my grandchildren because they have a very different worldview. When my oldest granddaughter was 12, she was only, I think, 7 at the time in 08 when they called me. She said, Papa, guess what? I said, what, Markel? She said, we voted today. I said, for who? Barack Obama, right? And then she was 7 years old in 2008. And so for me, it was a revelation that their parents were taking them to the voting place. And the parents could easily vote on their own, just have the kids follow them. But they said, you cast the ballots, right? And these girls who were very young, the baby was only 8 months old. The middle daughter was only 4 years old, and the oldest one was 7. And so they understood diversity in that sense, what it meant. And so reading books, watching television, they have a different worldview. And they don't have the minds. And the reality is that we're poisoned by what we learn through adults. And I must have poisoned my kids. I say things you say, things you do, people who you have over for dinner, people who you have conversations with. You think you're talking about somebody between you and your partner, and the kid overhears it. Aha, he doesn't like X's. Oh, aha, he doesn't like Y's. Aha, he doesn't like Z's. You just may be making a comment because you're mad, but those things make a big difference. And what makes diversity work is it has to be inclusive. That is, that it shouldn't just come to you. That people shouldn't look at you and say, well, that person has an accent. We all have accents based on where we're from, right? And I think that the whole idea is that there's no one America. There's a remarkable diversity among America. And I think that the books that we read, the people that we meet, the things that we share, the things that we embrace are part of it. And that's why I need to know what Sean Hannity is saying, even if I disagree with him, because he represents a part of America. And it's important to understand that. I need to listen to Piers Morgan at night because he has an interesting point of view. And he's going to attack the new Black Panthers as much as he's going to attack the Aryan race. The whole idea is that who's really giving something that's going to be helpful and meaningful. And all that is very important. And even that, I mean, if you think about diversity, I'm not even going to take a poll, but it's very interesting. The view about guns is as diverse as you can imagine. And so, and I've used guns. I don't own one, but I've used guns going hunting with friends in the South. And so it's hard for me to say don't have guns to people who have grown up with them, who believe in them, who respectfully use them to hunting and for safety, etc. I think that's important. What bothers me when you talk about diversity, what bothers me is there's 300 million guns on our streets today. 300 million. That makes no sense at all. That's what makes it scary, because everybody gets a gun. There are schools now where all the teachers have guns. That doesn't seem to me that it makes it safer. I'm going to be raising my hand up. I got it, boom, I thought he was going to rob me, right? I can't imagine that in my 7th grade math class, right? That I'm agitated about a problem and I'm getting shot because they thought I was being unruly. No, I was asking a question. I just think that the diversity can have its benefits and its limitations. And we've got to figure out how to make it some of both. Even going to the continent of Africa or the continents of Asia or the countries in Europe or South America, all that is part of learning how people are different, but we are over 90% all the same. If we speak different languages, our hair looks different, our color's different, but in reality we are cut from the same cloth, and I think that is what we have to celebrate, and I hope that will be what will be in the 21st century. And you know what? I think in our lifetime that we will be so diverse. It'll be very interesting. Let me end here. I remember in 2010 when Barack Obama filled out the census form and it became public, like any other person. And how did he fill it out? Remember? What's his race? He could have said biracial. He could have said white, like his mother. He could have said African, like his father. You know how he filled it out? African American. And the public criticized that. Some people criticize it. Oh, he's choosing one group rather than another, right? But it's going to be very interesting. Can you put 7 different things? I have students who are 7 different ethnicities, or 5. They're not 1 or 2. They're some of everything, and that's a good thing. And they want to embrace that. And I think I'm not just X. I'm X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D. And I think that, to me, is a wonderful thing, that they see and celebrate the diversity within them. And they want to make sure that more of us celebrate as we go forward. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. Professor Ogletree will now sign books here up front. And if you'd like to purchase a book in the back, you may do so. But please join us for the book signing.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.